One of the most beautiful fish on the planet lives in some of the world's most remote regions. It's a fish that I once dreamed of catching, and having caught my first wild brook trout in Ontario a few years ago, I began to dream of catching another. Shunning the easy option of catching a stocked fish back at home, nothing less than the real deal, a wild fish would do, and that meant travelling to the wilderness. The aggression and beauty of the brook trout is almost unrivalled in the trout world. With their bright painted spots and white-edged fins, there are few fish that can rival their livery. This adventure would see me venturing into the depths of the Canadian wilderness. Miminisca Lodge is located on a huge lake of the same name. It can only be accessed by float plane. Thankfully, back in the 1950s, the de Havilland Company built classic float planes, and they are still the standard mode of transport to some of Canada's most remote wilderness fishing lodges, including Miminisca. The river that we were due to fish flowed out of the lake that the lodge was located on, and it was a short flight, but it really was about as remote as you can get. With no cell phone or radio coverage, this was truly off-the-grid stuff. The first day at Miminisca was an amazing adventure. Our guide, Mark Melnick, had laid on for us to fish an amazing river, 4 wild brook trout, a species that I love fishing for, and you'll see why later. Nonetheless, it was a trip that almost didn't happen.
Client safety is first and foremost, but luckily, around 10 o'clock the weather lifted and we had a window that we could get out of the lodge and get up to the Freestone River.
After touching down on the lake, it was time to unload the canoes and fishing equipment before attempting a launch just a short distance downriver.
So the brook trout up here are basically unpressured all year long. And they're big. We call them the jewels of the north. They are big fish and they're ravenous. They are so hungry and they're so fly friendly that they even take dries.
The river constantly varied in character, from wide and slow to narrow, rocky and fast. With Mark constantly leading the way, we found ourselves exploring an amazing place. Because the river was low for the time of year, we explored the riffles and well-oxygenated water first.
And we're just going to work our way down this river, kind of carrying the canoes with us and fishing as we go. And it's hardly the purest end of the sport, I've got this monstrosity of a dry fly on, which I've called Jiminy Cricket. Yeehaw! Well, it took a streamer down. That's not a brook trout.
It's a walleye.
There you go. Well, that's my first walleye on a fly. Interesting fish, the walleye. It's very, very similar to our zander, but the colours are much more bright and there's a lot more yellow in them. Anyway, it may not be a brook trout, but...
The first fish that had taken my fly was a walleye, a species almost identical to the European zander. Until I'd hooked and caught one, Mark had no idea that walleye even existed in the remote wilderness river that we were fishing.
Now, is this a brook trout? It feels a bit more lively.
It is.
No. It's a walleye.
With 2 walleye under my belt, it was surely time for a brook trout, and when I hooked up the next time, it was a much more lively fish.
I don't think that's a walleye.
flashes. I haven't seen
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't think it's a walleye, mate. I think this could be what we're after.
It's a good fish.
It's a good fish.
It's a big walleye.
No, it's a big walleye. Man! Oh, I wonder what this is. I wonder if it's a walleye or a...
It's a pike.
It's a pike!
So now I'd caught 2 walleye and a pike. I was beginning to doubt that I'd ever get a brook trout.
We've come down here to this part of the river and it's much cooler. I think there's a spring here or something. And the water is much cooler. Well, the problem we've had today is that the water's been so warm, there are no insects hatching, and these are cold water fish really. Look at that. The markings on these fish are just exquisite. Great.
Well, it wasn't the biggest brook trout in the world, but it was truly wild and beautiful, and besides, the best was yet to come.